So my first question is, how did this project come to? Why did you choose this project, and how did it come to its entire fruition?
Yeah, I suppose it was always Keith, who is the writer-director, who's my other son.
Right.
He's a history grad.
Oh, okay.
He's a history buff anyway. So we were throwing different ideas around, and we said, well, you know what? Whilst it may be kind of quite a number of years out, maybe we should think about whether we can come up with something that's a little different. With the Collins film was out at the time, and we wanted to come up with something that was kind of would engage people, that was kind of close up and personal, and that told the story from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Oh, okay.
So that was the rationale behind it. That we wanted to tell it from the point of the ordinary person.
And what was the benefit of filming it both as a documentary and as like an actual action film? What did that serve to? How did that help with the filming process?
As a viewer watching it, and trying to put myself outside the fact that I worked on it, I think it makes it more interesting for, say, we sometimes screen it to schools and things like that, and it's a way of getting in there, showing the history and telling the history, but also being engaging, and it being we've had kids that have been watching it and they all seem to really enjoy it. I think sometimes if you try to be too heavy on the history or have too many talking heads, it can kind of weigh down the project, and your message isn't getting across. And then I think it's kind of essential for the Easter Rising to be shown like that, because it was an up close and personal guerrilla war, really, in the centre of a city, and that was kind of different for the time. Even the British soldiers were being trained to fight in trenches. And they weren't used to this kind of up close and personal fighting.
In the streets, the wide open streets.
Exactly. I mean, we're also used to it now. It could be Egypt or Ukraine, anywhere. That's quite normal now. But back then, it was something different. So I think it was important to show that aspect of it too.
Right, and in a way, it's kind of like a lead into what World War II ended up being, which is everyone fighting in the streets and everything else. So if people look at it in the terms of, well, this was going on during World War I, it's so weird. But then they think, if you stop and think, oh, well, they actually got training for World War II in a way when they were doing this. It's just a random, side note is, because they all fought in the streets in Russia and Germany and everywhere.
I think to a large extent it was the first, well, it was certainly the first time that the British were engaged in a guerrilla urban warfare.
Yes.
And also, coming back to the earlier question you had, we felt, and part of the reason why we took this approach was we felt that the audience itself could identify with what it must be like to be slightly claustrophobic, to be that close, because I think a lot of people think of fighting or warfare as being distant, and even more so now when you can do it with drones. But this is how it was. It also affected some of those people that we've talked to, relatives. Will say these people, their fathers or grandfathers or whatever were deeply affected.
Yeah. Personally, for me, I had ancestors who were both involved in the IRA and were witnesses to what the IRA did during the actual revolution, and then the Civil War, and right up to the end of everything with the Free State. So it's a whole bunch of stuff going on. On every family had everybody on every side. So it is, in my opinion, a very smart way of doing it. Particularly when you have the family get assassinated. I think that's just one way that it really hits the viewer that, my God, ordinary people who Irish people saying God save the king, and they're getting their families killed. That's something really strange and
sure.
Scary.
I mean, the people that got killed, they were loyalists. They were for king and country. So what happened to them was even more of a travesty, because they were supporting the British soldiers, and they didn't really like the fact that the volunteers were coming in outside their house,
taking over a war area.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Was there any part of this project for either of you that either you had to stop and think, "Whoa, this is incredibly an emotional experience," or that you felt it was overwhelming because it is the Easter Rising? So did you ever feel overwhelmed by the gravity of the project, or emotionally?
I felt overwhelmed by trying to do this on a ridiculously low budget. That's what I really felt overwhelmed by, to be quite honest with you. That was overwhelming. It's an interesting question because I think both of us, as we were shooting, felt that it was different. Now we've both been involved, and you've been involved in a lot of films, a lot of drama, and I've done a lot of documentary. But this kind of felt different, kind of felt a little bit special. So in that sense, there was a kind of an emotional connection with it. Plus, if you take the character that Colin played, which is kind of ironic,
right.
You know, when this came up originally, when Keith came across these Shouldice brothers, I said, I know Frank Shouldice. And he said, come on, you know. I said, no, I know Frank Shouldice. I said, my brother and sister live in the street, and Frank Shouldice lived at the top of that street. And when I was a kid, in the late 60s, or the late 50s into the 60s, I used to see this man cycling down. I used to rob his orchard. He had a great orchard. You know. So I used to rob his apples. And his son is still there, whom we also interviewed but didn't feature. So that is a connection. The other thing was one of the doctors who were on Mount Street Bridge trained my mother. My mother was a nurse in that hospital in the 30s. So she trained as a nurse in the 30s. And one of those young doctors ended up as a consultant there. So sometimes, you know, it's such a small place, Dublin and Ireland, really, you know, it's those kind of connections. But yeah.
I mean, for me, there's definitely an emotional involvement or connection because I'm a proud Irishman, and I'm a Republican with a small R, so I like that had a connection with me. But to be perfectly honest, when you're actually trying to make the film, all that goes out the window because there's so many other issues that are arising all the time,
right?
And you just want to make sure that what you're filming is as good as it can be. So you kind of, not that you forget about the history or anything of it, but there's so much else going on in terms of production that you can put that to the side. And it's only kind of now when we're going around doing screenings that you get a chance to think about it more. When you're actually filming it, and it's because of the budgetary limitations, you don't really have time to think about that, and you're worrying about other things,
Right. What was it like to play an actual historical figure involved with the Easter Rising? And a sniper at that too.
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's really cool for a guy to get to play with guns, especially in Ireland. It's a different kind of gun culture. So, it's not the first time I've done it. I have played historical figures. I played another guy, and whose name escapes me now. Sorry?
Was it Walsh?
Maybe the second name, but there's probably a lot of Walshes. But I mean, I played a guy before in the Irish Brigade, the American Civil War, so it's not the first time I've done it, but there is a kind of, you do feel a bit different because you know that this is a real person, a real character, and what they went through, and when you're looking down the barrel of the gun, you know that these people actually had to do it for real. I'm just playing around with it, Right. I'm just trying to do them justice, but they had to do it for real. So it does kind of resonate with you in that sense.
Right, and in, as you said, you did this with the American Civil War, but what was it like to do it for the Irish Rising? Like, what started the quote-unquote Irish Revolution that led to the Free State and eventually the Republic that we have today?
Yeah, it was kind of proud. I was proud to be able to do that, and I was really happy to be able to. I was involved in the crew mostly, but I was really happy to be able to be given a chance to play one of these heroes of the Irish Revolution.
One of the lesser known heroes. Too,
exactly. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that means it resonates with me even more. Than if it had been playing one of the 7 signatories or one of them. And then because of the connection with this guy, living at the top of my father's road when he grew up. That made it even more poignant for me, and I've subsequently met his son, and it's a big deal. It was funny, when we did the premiere in 2013 at the Jemison Dublin International Film Festival, a lot of their family was there, and it was funny because, you're saying, I'm talking to this guy who's in his 80s and I'm saying, oh, how's it going, son? Putting my arm around him. And then it's a bit of a joke, but then there is this real personal thing with the family and the kind of a connection there as well.
All right, one last question because I know we got to get up to the reception. They did mention during the Q&A the post office not being completely featured, and I think it's really smart because like they said, we all know what happened with the post office because it was wherever it was the main fighting ground and all these minor ones. How did you pick these two specific minor ones compared to everything? Because at the beginning, you showed the map of everything that was taken. So why did you pick those two specific?
These actually weren't. These were the two most ferocious battles. The battles where the greatest number of casualties occurred. So the actual number of casualties in the GPO doesn't come close to either of those two locations.
Not even close.
Not
I
even
definitely
close.
wouldn't call them minor. I mean, these were the two major battles, and the two most successful from an Irish point of view.
From a military point of view as well.
Yeah. So I mean, the GPO, like I was saying in the Q&A, is the reason it's considered the major one is because the leaders were there. It was GHQ.
GHQ.
You know, but like in wars today, the HQ is not where the action's going on.
Right.
You know,
Try to keep it away from them as much as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and then look, there's loads of other places around the city that don't get a look in, and we're trying to redress that with our Living History project that's grown out of this.
Right.
So, you know, on 1916film.com, we have a series of stories that we're starting to feature, and we hope to do, you know, to really put more meat on the bones of what happened in 1916, because at the moment, people, even at home in Ireland, don't really get it. There was a lot of different places going on, a lot of different fighting. I mean, if you go down near on the South Keys near Kilmainham, there's a place called, it's not there anymore, called the Mendicity Institute, and there was a huge amount of heavy fighting going on there at the very start of the week, you know, and it's only really towards the end of the week that the GPO starts getting hit really badly. So, you know, I wouldn't say there's any real minor locations. Stephen's Green, again, huge amount of fighting going on there. So it's just because the signatories were in the GPO that it gets that kind of recognition, I guess.
I'm really sorry, I forgot one more thing that I meant to
no
add.
problem.
Could you just talk a little bit about the Living History project and what you guys are doing?
Well, Colin actually leads that project, and he's put the whole website together, the Facebook, he's doing all of that. He's writing most of the stuff, so maybe he's the best man to...
Absolutely.
Well, I guess, you know, originally before we aired on Irish television, I was kind of thinking of ways that maybe we could generate a bit more of a buzz, a bit more publicity, give little snapshot videos to people. So the idea originally was actually to focus on people that we've already seen in the film, you know, Ned Daly or the Shouldice brothers, and kind of give more of their story, not just in that week, because if you're just looking at someone 1 week in someone's life, it's very one-dimensional. So we started talking about it, and then when it actually did air on television, we started getting all these emails coming into us saying, oh, you know, my brother or my grandfather, or in some cases my father or mother, was in this place or that place, and we want you to hear our story, you know. Funnily enough, actually, the first one was a complaint, because one of the places we do feature, Clanwilliam House, there was 4 people get out of that alive. You know, there's only really 8 or 9 there anyway, who were holding off a couple of thousand British soldiers, but 4 people get out, and 2 of them were brothers called Tom and Jim Walsh. And you know, we mentioned Tom Walsh because his name is mentioned in one of the statements that we use. He's, you know, James Doyle, and that we feature. You know, you don't have a whole lot of time to give everyone a voice in a 90-minute movie, so we picked James Doyle to tell their story. And in his statement, he says, you know, George Reynolds was lying on a pool of blood, Tom Walsh was lying beside him. So the family
suggested that Walsh was dead, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And we said, okay, yeah, we can see why that you might think that, but this is coming directly from this man's statement. And the reason we left it in was because it kind of shows the chaos that was going on in Clanwilliam House. It was on fire, you know, and they needed to try and get out. So the family got in contact and said, you know, plus these 2 guys were paramount to this, to what happened in Clanwilliam House. And we said, okay, well, you know, look, we'd love to meet up with you and hear your story and hear more about these 2 men. So we went up to Belfast, and we had a lovely meeting with the family, and we met some of the other family down in Dublin. And that's kind of where the Living History project started. And then more and more people started getting in contact with us, and we realised that these are important stories that need to be told. Everyone knows about the GPO, the leaders, and all that kind of stuff. no one really knows about these ordinary soldiers, the ordinary Irish and British and the civilians, and we feel it's very important that people do know about their stories.
So effectively we've created a portal, an online portal where people's stories can be told, and it's going to be a multimedia type, so we're going to use narration, we're going to use voice, and we're going to use video, you know. So that's it.
So that
sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
sounds
well,
great. I'll be sure
check
to
it out on
out.
1916film.com.
Okay, I'll be sure to check that out. Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much, Colin. Appreciate
Lovely
it.
to meet you.
Good to meet you.